Tonight, the world is once again holding its breath, not because of a sudden explosion or a breaking battlefield development, but because of something far more familiar, a decision made in Washington that is now sending shockwaves far beyond American borders. Across Europe, Asia, and the Middle East, analysts, diplomats, and ordinary citizens are asking the same uneasy question. How did another American miscalculation manage to shake global stability yet again? If you look closely at the timeline, the tension did not appear overnight. It built slowly, almost quietly, through a series of policy moves, diplomatic signals, and strategic assumptions that many experts warned were fragile from the very beginning. Yet inside the halls of power, confidence remained high. Officials believed the move would project strength, reinforce alliances, and demonstrate leadership. Instead, what followed was confusion, market volatility, and growing uncertainty among allies who suddenly found themselves reassessing their trust in American decision-making. And that is where tonight's story truly begins. Not with anger, not with accusations, but with uncertainty. Because uncertainty is what destabilizes the world most effectively. When countries cannot predict how a superpower will act, they begin preparing for every possibility. And preparation in geopolitics often looks a lot like escalation. Within hours of the announcement, global financial markets reacted first. Investors tend to sense instability faster than governments admit it publicly. Stock indexes dipped across multiple regions, energy prices fluctuated sharply, and currency markets showed signs of nervous repositioning. None of these movements alone signaled crisis, but together they painted a picture of hesitation, a global system suddenly unsure of its footing. Meanwhile, diplomatic channels lit up behind the scenes. European leaders reportedly requested urgent briefings. Asian partners sought clarification through private communications. Even long-standing allies began asking questions that rarely need to be asked aloud. Was this coordinated? Were partners consulted? And perhaps most importantly, what happens next? For decades, American leadership relied not only on military or economic power, but on predictability. Allies could disagree with Washington, but they usually understood its strategic direction. That predictability allowed global institutions to function smoothly. Trade agreements, security alliances, and crisis responses all depended on a shared understanding of how the United States would behave under pressure. But this time felt different. A senior diplomatic observer described the atmosphere as strategic whiplash, a moment when policies appear to shift faster than global systems can adjust. Governments suddenly found themselves recalculating risks that had seemed settled just weeks earlier. Defense planners reviewed contingency scenarios. Economic ministers evaluated supply chain vulnerabilities. Intelligence agencies monitored reactions from rival powers looking for opportunities within the uncertainty. And while officials avoided dramatic public language, their actions revealed concern. Across newsrooms worldwide, coverage shifted from routine political reporting to broader geopolitical analysis. Commentators began connecting dots between recent decisions and growing instability in multiple regions simultaneously. The question was no longer whether the decision mattered. It was how far the consequences might spread. What makes moments like this particularly complex is that no single event operates in isolation. Every global decision interacts with existing tensions, ongoing conflicts, economic competition, technological rivalry, and domestic political pressures within multiple countries. When a powerful nation misjudges timing or reaction, the ripple effects amplify existing fractures. Consider the perspective of smaller allied nations. These countries often align their foreign policies closely with American strategy, trusting that coordination provides security. But when surprises occur, those same nations face domestic political backlash. Citizens ask why their government supported policies they did not fully control. Opposition leaders demand independence from unpredictable partners. Public debates intensify, reshaping internal politics far from Washington itself. And that internal political pressure matters because alliances are ultimately sustained by public trust, not just signed agreements. In several capitals, lawmakers openly questioned whether consultation processes had weakened. Some argued privately that alliance structures must evolve to reduce reliance on single-nation decision-making. Others warned against overreaction, emphasizing that strategic partnerships endure occasional disagreements. Yet even those defending cooperation acknowledged something had shifted, a sense that coordination could no longer be assumed automatically. At the same time, rival powers watched carefully. Geopolitical competitors rarely need to act aggressively when uncertainty spreads naturally. Instead, they observe, analyze, and adapt messaging to highlight divisions among alliances. State media narratives in multiple regions frame the situation as evidence of declining Western cohesion. Whether accurate or exaggerated, such narratives influence global perception, and perception itself shapes diplomacy. The American administration, for its part, moved quickly to reassure partners. Officials emphasized long-term commitments and clarified objectives behind the controversial move. Press briefings stressed stability, continuity, and shared security goals. Yet reassurance often takes longer to resonate internationally than the original shock takes to spread. And that delay created a window, a moment when speculation filled the information gap. Experts appeared on television panels offering competing interpretations. Some argued the decision represented necessary strategic assertiveness in a rapidly changing world. Others described it as a preventable mistake rooted in domestic political calculations rather than global consensus. The debate itself became part of the story, reinforcing the perception of uncertainty. Ordinary citizens felt the effects in quieter ways. Rising fuel prices, fluctuating markets, and anxious headlines contributed to a broader sense of global fragility. For many people watching from thousands of miles away, geopolitics suddenly felt personal again, a reminder that decisions made in distant capitals can influence everyday life almost instantly, and perhaps that is the most powerful aspect of moments like this. They reveal how interconnected the modern world has become. A single policy shift can influence shipping routes, currency values, diplomatic relationships, and public sentiment across continents within hours. As the first day unfolded, analysts began comparing the situation to past moments when American decisions unintentionally triggered wider consequences. History offers many examples where intentions and outcomes diverged sharply. In each case, the lesson was similar. Global leadership carries extraordinary influence, and even small miscalculations can produce outsized reactions. Yet history also shows recovery is possible if communication stabilizes quickly and trust is rebuilt. Behind closed doors, emergency consultations intensified. Advisors worked through the night drafting coordinated statements. Diplomats negotiated language designed to reassure without appearing defensive. Military officials monitored regional developments carefully, ensuring that misunderstandings did not escalate into real-world confrontations, because in international politics, perception can sometimes become reality if left unmanaged. As hours turned into days, attention shifted toward the broader implications. Would allies demand greater autonomy? Would economic partnerships adjust to hedge against future unpredictability? Would rivals gain strategic advantages simply by waiting patiently? These questions remain unanswered tonight, but their existence alone signals how deeply the situation has resonated. And perhaps the most striking element of this unfolding story is not outrage, but recalculation. Countries are not reacting emotionally. They are thinking strategically. They are measuring risk, reassessing dependence, and reconsidering how global stability should function in an era where certainty feels increasingly rare. Back in Washington, officials continue insisting that long-term objectives remain unchanged. They argue that temporary turbulence often accompanies necessary strategic shifts. Supporters say strong leadership sometimes requires difficult decisions that appear controversial at first, but prove effective over time. Critics counter that stability itself is a strategic asset, one that must be protected as carefully as military strength or economic power. Between those perspectives lies the reality the world now faces, a period of adjustment whose outcome remains uncertain. And so tonight, global stability hangs not on a single decision alone, but on what happens next. The conversations, the reassurances, the compromises, and the lessons learned in the aftermath. Because history rarely judges moments by the mistake itself, but by how leaders respond once the consequences become clear. The coming hours will reveal whether this episode becomes a temporary disruption or the beginning of a deeper shift in international relations. Diplomats will continue talking, markets will continue reacting, citizens will continue watching, and the world once again waits to see whether uncertainty gives way to stability or whether another chapter of global tension has only just begun.